I don't know. We have a quorum, so we should start. Okay, you all heard is it the green flag? Just wait, recording in progress. So that means we have a meeting going on now. So let's call the January 11th special meeting of the Government Planning Commission order. I'm glad you all made it. The agenda says Wednesday, January 11th, but today's Thursday. It is 7:02 p.m. and we have a quorum of 6 planning commissioners. All commissioners are here except Commissioner Heidi Boyes. We have 4 members of the public in attendance, and how many online? Anybody? No. And Tim Staub of Montgomery County Planning Commission is here with us tonight as well. Tonight's agenda hopefully will be short. Not many, some of you might have come to expect to hear further discussion about 230 Haverford. The applicant has requested that we defer that discussion to our next meeting, our regular meeting in February, based on the feedback they received from the Planning Commission and from the HARB earlier this week. They wanted more time to consider their plans, and there are other things that were referred to in the borough engineer's letter that they felt they wanted to work on as well, particularly the green roof and stormwater and things like that. So they felt it would be better to take more time tightening up their application rather than coming to the meeting. So we'll have them on the agenda the first meeting of February. But everything else about the calendar in terms of the dates of the conditional use, council meetings, and so forth, all remain the same as was announced at our last meeting. So we'll move to, I don't have anything else to update. Tim, do you have any updates from the Montgomery County Planning Commission?
Does the survey continues to get people coming or get responses? Because we did send out an email to
this would be
the active transportation survey. We did send out a bunch of individual emails to I think every religious organization and educational organization within the borough and township. So hopefully if you're part of a church or your kids are going to school locally, you hopefully will be getting an email from your the head of whoever runs it, asking you to participate. So if you already haven't or taken the survey route, I highly encourage you to do so.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let's move to approval of minutes. We were so excited about our agenda last meeting, we forgot to approve the December minutes. We threw the whole borough administration into a tailspin because of that. So tonight we will ask for approval of December 4th minutes, which were submitted by our former secretary, Michael Maldini, who's here tonight. They were circulated before the last meeting. Does anyone have any comments, questions, suggestions for edits they would like to make to the minutes? Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes as presented? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, they're approved. Not to be outdone, Jennifer submitted minutes from our last meeting last week. You received the first draft over the weekend or Monday, and then the final ones were today. Has anyone any questions, comments, concerns about the minutes that Jennifer circulated? Anyone care to make a motion regarding the minutes?
I move to accept them as written.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you, Jennifer, for taking on that new role. We appreciate that very, very much. So I will forward the December and the January 3rd minutes on to the borough office for posting. We have 2 agenda items tonight. One is carried over from our last meeting, which is the consideration of a zoning amendment that has been advertised by council related to mixed use, mix of uses in multifamily buildings in the 5A district. And the second topic is a discussion of potential planning priorities for the next 2 years. And so I'll talk a bit about each of those when we get to them. So that's what's on our agenda for this evening. So let's move on then to the advertised ordinance. This is an ordinance that relates to the 5A district. I'll give a little background. It came about after our review of 119 North Essex Avenue. I think Tim, Michael, Kevin, and I all reviewed the application against the code, and we all came up with different conclusions about whether the building could actually be approved as proposed in the code, right? The application is seeking a conditional use to create a building over 32 foot tall. You can create, right now the required, or the maximum height in that district is 25 feet, except along Windsor Avenue, you can obtain a 4-story building 45 feet through conditional use, a mixed use building. There are also issues related to the types of uses, a dentist office, and mixing that in a residential building. Because we all read it and we saw different things, we concluded that really there were complications in the code that were caused by a base code, a revision by council to lower the building heights, and the passage of the historic district ordinance, and those parts of the code just didn't play well together. In the spirit of good planning and supporting an application for which at our meeting, I think there was very strong support for the application. We felt that a code amendment would be the proper way to review this application. And so we quickly drafted an amendment, presented it to council. Council agreed to advertise it. This is our chance to consider the amendment. The amendment has a couple of accomplishes a couple of basic things. First of all, the 5A district currently does not allow for multifamily houses. That is a house-type structure which has more than one dwelling unit in it, as opposed, it is different from an apartment building in terms of the site planning, massing, frontages, and things like that. It really is morphologically a house. It just happens to have more than one unit in it, or more than 2 units in it. That's not allowed in the 5A district, even though there are several buildings like that in the 5A district. So what this amendment says is these buildings are permitted in the 5A district if they are in the historic district and if they are contributing resources, which means we retroactively permit any building of that sort which is in the district, but new construction of that sort is still not allowed. Because I don't think it's the intent of the 5A district to allow for multifamily houses to be built. It's fine if they're there and they want to continue. The second thing the code accomplishes is multifamily house, in wherever else it's coded, I think, for most part, can only have residential uses in it. And so what the second thing this amendment says is for multifamily houses in the 5A district, you can have the same mix of uses that you could have if you had a mixed use building. Because really, aside from the morphology of the building, there's no real difference. So it equalizes the two buildings in terms of what the allowable uses are. The third thing it does is it tweaks. One of the things we learned is that our safety net of dealing with non-conforming uses is very complicated, and there are some holes in that. And so the next thing this does, it says if you have one of these buildings, a multifamily house, in this district, even if it's not conforming dimensionally in terms of height and things like that, you can continue that use. If you build an addition, the addition cannot exceed whatever the dimensional requirements are for that district. So you can't build something that
Seems eminently fair to me. I mean, we have in the last few years draped a zoning code over an old and wonky town. And there are things like this that need to be little wrinkles that need to be ironed out, and this is one of them, and I think it's quite appropriate.
I have a question about the, couple questions. One is regarding the side facade, whatever the front facade is required to conform with the frontage build-out requirements, but the side facade isn't.
That's
under EHA.
Zoning require lots of signature, that is. I'm glad Michael's here because he can help me if I'm wrong on this.
I mean,
Do you have the answer?
I don't have it in front of
I
me.
mean, I'm just not sure about it. I thought we should discuss it because I guess it depends whether
I think
the
that,
side facade is as relevant as the other one.
Which,
And
provision
would-
you looking at?
Section E, I mean, well.
Wasn't the intent just that you don't have to develop the whole length of the frontage? It says,
Well, it says it shall not be subject to the minimum frontage buildup.
Yeah, because normally you would have to build out to a minimum, but in this case, if you did that, you would be contravening the Harb's advice, which was to make the addition secondary to the primary structure. If I'm recalling the reason for that, because you would have to pull the addition closer to the side frontage rather than right now, which is set a little bit back to the to de-emphasize itself relative to the primary structure. That's my recollection regarding why that was necessary.
I guess the minimum frontage build-out kind of just surprised me. I didn't even realize there was a minimum frontage build-out in the code for front facades.
There is in 5A in order to provide an urban form.
Oh, I
Yeah.
see, gotcha, okay, sure, okay. Okay. Fine, the next one is section F. And it's basically saying that all those things are grandfathered in, and I'm wondering, I mean, I'm not saying it shouldn't be here, but isn't it addressed elsewhere in the code that if there's an existing condition, it's grandfathered? I mean, basically all these.
No, and that was one of the problems, is that we actually thought that provision existed, but when we looked into it, and some of the ones you see here do exist, but the problem was that they were really narrowly tailored, and I think that the intent was, so let me step back. Some of the non-conformity provisions that in your head you would think apply to the entire zoning code, actually, the way it's written, they don't. So you have non-conformity provisions that are scattered across different sections, and then in the text, they only apply to a specific section. So when we were reviewing it, what we found was that in order to approve 119 North Essex as written, you would have to apply non-conformity provisions across sections in a way that you actually can't by the text of the code. And so some of these had to be, and this is kind of like there needs to probably be going forward like some work done to like pull these together into a comprehensive non-conformity section that applies broadly, but for now it was mainly a band-aid to like put them into the sections where they're needed. It was something that no one really realized.
Yeah, well, and it goes to the whole thing of the purpose of the form zoning code was to eliminate nonconformities, basically to say that if there was something existing that was something to work to, basically that was the form that we're saying exists and therefore should apply in the form zoning code.
But some of that contravenes the goals of the historic ordinance as well. Just, I mean, as an example, like my roof, right, my roof doesn't meet, I have a flat roof, doesn't meet the form-based code. And I don't fall under the historic district, but theoretically if I did, because I'm 1950s construction, you're doing something that radically changes the structure itself. And I think that there are a number of examples like that where if you forced something to meet a code that was in some ways designed for new
that's a
builds.
very specific issue that I don't agree with anyway, so you touched on one of those nonconformities that should be normal,
Right.
should be conforming.
The issue here was,
And that could be a subject we could talk about.
the setback, the specific issue here, the reason this was changed was because this is the chapter about site planning standards. That's like, not the whole massing of the building, but just how it sits on the lot, right? So setbacks, essentially, front, distance from the street and so forth. The only thing this former code said about setbacks was that pertained to the additions to the buildings. It turns out this building is not conforming in terms of its front setback. Therefore, it would need to get a variance to do any of the changes that it wants to make, because
You mean the side setback?
no, the front setback it's a non-conforming building, but we don't have any provision that allows that particular conformity to continue if any of the uses are changed. So basically what happens is, if you change a use, if you build an addition, you all of a sudden have to conform to all the provisions of the code, unless there's something that says, if you're not conforming, you don't have to, right? And what we found was, this building is not conforming in terms of its front setback. It's off by like 2 feet, or less than that, but it doesn't conform. And there's no provision that allows that building to continue legally in its use with that non-conformity.
Right.
And so that's what this does. It says, when alterations or additions are proposed, it can be continued even if it doesn't comply with the site plan.
And it's mostly just because of the change of use.
And the addition. Those are things which trigger it needing to conform with the zoning code.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just sort of saying, like, if you got a building and it doesn't meet our setback rules and you want to reuse it for something else, you can go ahead and use it for something else, as long as any addition you make does conform to our
Yeah,
rules.
okay.
That's what I said. Believe me, Heidi.
No, I mean, I think when Mike
It's
said
like
it was
forensics,
addressed in 5A, that made more sense.
No, what I mean, Heidi, is we all looked at it and we all had to, like, it was so complicated to figure this stuff out. So your question was like one of the millions that we had to kind of stew on.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions?
No.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Aaron, are you reconsidering your?
No, good. No questions or comments, though. If the board's done, or if the commission's done, the county can just do, because we're writing our letter right now for it.
Okay.
So,
Well, any other comments from planning commissioners or questions? Okay, your turn, Tim.
but overall, this is consistent with Concord 2040, particularly the town center area. While it's not to the degree of the building, it's not attached. It's not following the attached provision, but it is still buildings close. It is a building close to the sidewalk. It is a mix of different uses, and it is particularly a continuation of the historic property. It also falls in very well with the Narberth 2040 comprehensive plan, which calls for adaptive reuse and basically trying to preserve the buildings as much as possible. And this ordinance does that very well. So that's it.
Thank you. A pat on the back. Okay. As is usual, we do invite public comment on this specific agenda item at this time before the planning commission discusses and votes. So is anyone in the public either in the room tonight or I guess we're not quite online?
There's nothing online.
We're on.
Anyone care to comment or ask a question about this? Okay, hearing no public comment, then any further discussion from the planning commission? Okay, anyone care to make a motion? You have to give up prizes for motions.
I move that we recommend this ordinance as written for adoption.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, all in favor of recommending the ordinance as presented to us for adoption, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, all right. Well, thank you, Michael, for your work on this. Well, your last access point. I'll get this one. Okay, our last topic tonight is a discussion of potential planning priorities for the next 2 years. I'll give a little background as to why this came out once before you and how I hope we can proceed. So the reason this came about is Montgomery County Planning Commission's biannual triangle, 3-year consulting contract was up for renewal last year, and council was reconsidering it, and they renewed the contract. Typically, a contract has a scope of work. What do you think you're going to do? Besides showing up and patting us on the back, which, believe me, is worth its weight in the borough's paying. But in any case, and I sat in a meeting with the borough staff and Tim one day and realized that we ought to get some broader input into that, particularly since we have a council of new members on it that has just been seated. And so we ought to give council a chance to decide, the new council, what its priorities are. These people ran, they were elected, we'd like to know what they think and what efforts we should be working on. And also, it would be good to get the planning commissioner's insight and recommendation to council about what we should be focusing on. So I've requested time in an upcoming council meeting at a workshop. We can discuss what those priorities might be, and felt that it would be good for us to talk about it first. And so we have a little bit of a breather tonight, so I thought we could do that for a while. So is that scenario clear? So essentially this will be a 2 or 3 year kind of, I mean, obviously things could come up, things could change, but as of now, this hope will be to kind of set some direction. So I went through our various notes, various charts and things that we've had. I asked some folks for some input and distilled a list of potential topics for us to look at. And so I know I asked Tim to review, I know MCPC staff keeps a checklist of how we're doing against the comprehensive plan, the kind of master to-do list. And also keeps a checklist of potential zoning projects to work on. So I asked Tim to review those, and a little later I'll ask him to tell us what you've learned from that. But I distilled what I had in my notes to this 2-page memo, and I gave you. So I'll review that, then I'll ask Tim, then I'll ask you all if you have any thoughts. Maybe I'll ask Tim first if he has any thoughts, and then ask you all if you have any questions about these topics, or if you have any topics you would like to suggest for consideration. What I hope to leave tonight with is a sense of which one do you feel more strongly about, and which one do you feel less strongly about. It's not really valuable for us to rigorously say, oh, that's a 3.2 and that's a 3.1, because council's going to have its own ideas. I think they just need to know from us what we think is important for them to consider. So here is the list that I came up with. And I might even try to group them even more in broader topics than they are here. But the first one is planning for Montgomery Avenue, which would, almost by necessity be a multi-municipal project. So that would require persuading Marion to put this on the agenda. But as a planning exercise, could be very comprehensive. It could take into housing, economic development, public infrastructure, management of resources like parking and so forth. And so that's something we would definitely need to rely on consulting services for and collaboration with Lower Marion Township. And I did put in these notes the relevant sections and recommendations from the comprehensive plan so you can remember what we said about it when that plan was adopted. The second major topic is looking at residential zoning. And there are a couple of maybe even competing reasons for doing that. One of them, which Michael brought to our attention, is that there still are a large number of houses in the borough that are non-conforming, like 119 Essex. And when owners want to do something with those, they can unintentionally run into regulatory problems. So one thing to do is to look at issues of lot size, building coverage, impervious coverage, and see if there's a way of rectifying non-conformities for more of the property owners in the borough. Then another issue, which was brought to our attention by the HARB, is to review residential zoning regulations in the historic district to consider appropriate sizes and locations for additions. It's an issue the HARB is dealing with right now. Since the HARB is interested in that and it is related to zoning, it makes it to the list of possible things to work on. There's some thought that we should be reviewing residential zoning for areas in the borough where denser infill can be encouraged. Through smaller lot coverages, openness to small apartment buildings or smaller houses on smaller lots. That is a topic that's come up in different ways. And then a small but interesting topic is to create a new frontage type for houses with sleeping porches, because we don't have one. And this is important because we've had a few houses that have been converted and expanded that have sleeping porches in the front, and sort of trying to figure out how big the front can be and so forth has become an issue. Anyway, there's a lot of dimensions of residential zoning that relate to a variety of topics, and so that suggests that maybe that could be a project to look into those things. We already talked about the potential of reviewing all of the provisions in the code that apply to nonconformities, nonconforming uses, nonconforming site plans, nonconforming building massing, and sort of organizing them and rationalizing them and reconsidering them in light of the historic district ordinance. The reason that is important is because when the historic district ordinance was passed for houses, for the properties in the historic district, which is the great majority of properties in the borough, the option of simply tearing down and starting over with something that does conform is no longer there. And so people are stuck with buildings that don't conform to the code in different ways, and as like 119 Essex have run into complications in actually trying to preserve the buildings. So there's reasons to look at that that are very practical. Also, in addition to the sort of simplifying code administration and the sort of what property owners understanding what they could expect. The same could be said of our growing network of special exceptions and conditional uses. I think as we've applied these, we've learned that they don't always function the way we would hope, particularly because the special exception and conditional use provisions don't always have specific criteria against which the applications can be evaluated. They simply say you need a special exception to do this, but don't say what you have to prove to get the special exception. So you just go ask for one. Some of the conditional uses as well, or the conditions may not be as applicable or rigorous. And I think upon reevaluation, we might see that some of these maybe aren't even necessary anymore, particularly like you need a special exception to have this kind of store and this kind of block. So just to sort of look at the whole system of special exceptions and conditional uses to see if it is up to date on our needs, and again, if it is efficient in terms of code administration. Which brings us to a larger topic, which is whether or not we should consider just sort of a recodification of the code altogether. A kind of neutral project, not to change the meaning of the code, but simply to clean up the organization of it. I think you'll find, for example, conditional uses are tucked in 4 or 5 different parts of the code, and special exceptions are, if you asked yourself, what is the whole list of things for which you need to apply for a special exception, we'd all come up with different answers because it's all presented very haphazardly. And because we have a historic district again, trying to present that with more clarity so owners in the historic district know what they can do is very important. An issue that came up recently with 230 Haverford is whether it would be better for us to have our design standards in the Saldo as opposed to the zoning code. Whether we could achieve more that way in terms of having more design standards, and whether we could ease code administration by providing more flexibility with those standards. That is a legal question in a way first, but could be part of a project of kind of reorganizing our code so it works better for us. And then finally, a very smaller topic, but it has come up a lot. I remember we tried to discuss it once, was site planning standards for two reasons. One is we've learned at the Price House, 714 Montgomery, that our rules for side yards, backyards, lot lines and things like that are not necessarily as precise as we want them to be, and they don't really work when we have lots that are unusual, that have like 5 sides instead of 4, or touch 2 streets but aren't on a corner. And you might say, wow, that's pretty rare, but it turns out we get things like that a lot. So looking at those site planning issues, and then secondly, an issue raised by Kevin Walsh, comes up a lot across his desk, placement and screening of features such as pools, generators, HVAC equipment, and other physical structures that are not technically buildings. Can we provide more clarity? Those don't rise to the level of recodification, but it's an issue that has come up a lot. And going through our notes, I saw it a lot. So those are the things I came up with, looking at our minutes and looking at issues we've been keeping track of. Tim, what have you discovered through your look at the comprehensive plan and our zoning list?
So really just looking at the comprehensive plan, as I've already seen as this thing will let me sort through. There we go. One was the Montgomery Avenue. It can be kind of a part of the active transportation plan, but it probably deserves its own collective action with Lower Merion, just because it is a secondary business corridor. It is a very active corridor. It is particularly with vehicle traffic, and it'd be really good to have some kind of either a comprehensive plan for the area or a unified zoning district between the 2 municipalities to define, like, we want this to kind of feel like, yes, you are literally driving on the border, but also it feels like a commercial corridor. And establish an annual summary of accomplishments related to the comprehensive plan. Because what we were doing is we were basing this information off of what Chloe and Maggie had kind of done over the years to create this document that I shared with Todd. But it was kind of a document tracking of what's been complete. What do you rank the highest? So there's a score. We don't know how the score was ever made, so we don't really know how council was prioritizing it. So having some kind of accomplishments, essentially.
Sort of a regular process of review progress.
Yeah. And someone can verify this for me, as I've only been around for 6 months, but does the municipality have a municipal maintenance plan?
what does that mean?
So that would mean keeping track of your particularly deferred maintenance items, and making sure you're building out towards funding it, and anything that's also coming up that needs to be renewed or refreshed. I remember overhearing something about like, there was like the air conditioning experience that we had in the summer. That would be something to kind of have on that, just every X amount of years, just keep someone coming back in to make sure that, just to make sure it gets done.
I know the borough, the borough manager who was formerly assistant borough manager worked on issues like that. I don't know whether there's a formal plan or not. Does anyone here on council know? Is there a facilities plan that we have? Does that cover that?
There was a facilities report, analysis and report, and I believe a lot of the improvements have been based off of that, but it's old. I forget what the year was. And I think that was the last one.
Matt West did
And then
that.
what
Sean
year
did
was, that was 2019.
Okay, so update the facility study.
I mean, the best thing in the end is just put it in the code saying, so often we will do this.
Mm-hmm.
Just so then there's a bit of teeth to push people to do it. And then another item that I've looked for is a shade tree assessment. You guys have done that?
You have.
Jim, we did
Long
Aubrey,
time
we hired
ago.
Aubrey, our reading to do that too.
Yeah, that was like from
10 years ago?
17.
Yeah.
2017?
There was a tree inventory done, produced recommendations of what kind of species we can use for diversity around town. The Shade Tree Commission has been operating off of that since then, you know.
So we could, the action would be to check and see when that would be done, especially after Monday. I mean, geez, or whatever, where they might end the storms.
Only lost one tree, I understand.
Identify spaces for benches and shade, additional benches and shade trees, particularly in park and public right of way. That will likely be kind of linked with the active transportation plan because benches in the end are a very important feature if you want to encourage people to walk places. It is a spot to rest and recuperate a bit. Let's see. Formalize some form of coordination between staff, the Narberth Business Association, and other community organizations. So basically create some kind of group that would meet and basically discuss the issues of the borough so no one's existing in silos. That's always an important thing because sometimes everybody talks past each other and sometimes some people have very similar ideas and it's good to get everybody in the room every once in a while to hash out what some of the issues they are and see maybe someone else has a solution.
But do you have a notice of borough forum for that right now?
Can you say that again?
So it would be basically some kind of coordination. You can make it a committee, a meeting between the borough staff, the Narberth Business Association, and other community organizations to basically sit down and discuss. Here are all of our problems. Here's a list of grievances between each other. I know, between each other. But in the end, rather than talking like past each other, either online or in conversation, everybody's sitting in the same place and they're able to maybe isolate solutions, but also acknowledge like here are some issues that we do have and we should be looking for solutions if possible.
Other than the Narberth Business Association, what kind of other organizations?
There's always schools, religious institutions, any major civic institution that is in and around town because most people in this room except for I think me live here, so you want to make sure that we're communicating like between the different groups.
Tim, is this a recommendation that's in the plan now?
D1.I.
So we don't have anything formal existing like that. I know the Narberth Business Association works through some of the committees on various things, but other than that, I don't think there's anything formal.
The D11 says formalized coordination between borough staff, Narberth Business Association, and other community organizations who serve as community event sponsors to address use of shared resources and costs.
And is that annually, like once, does it say when or how often?
There is a park users meeting, but that's only related to park use,
Mm-hmm.
and that's annual.
The rec board meets.
Right, the Parks and Rec Board meets with the various people, organizations that use the Narberth Park and.
With a member of council, correct? With a member of council leading that meeting?
No, it's Parks and Rec Board that is leading.
Because it used to be that their council, there was a council person assigned to lead that meeting.
There's a council liaison, which is me.
And you don't lead that meeting?
I don't lead the meeting, it's the chair of Parks and Rec Board.
So Tim, that was a priority somewhere for implementing, okay. So that's why you've mentioned it, because it was, okay. What else, what other kind of planning issues came up?
One
As
item-
priorities that have not yet been addressed?
One item that I did notice, and it came up in the 230 Haverford, was evaluate sidewalk code regulations and updates.
Could you just update the sidewalk code?
They did the borough-wide sidewalk audit. So they identified 190 that failed inspection, and they notified all of the residents. So that's in progress already.
Is that what that refers to?
So this would be looking at the planning regulations related to any development that comes through. For example, the one item on 230 Haverford is that there are 3 driveways for it. One of those driveways, the sidewalk is flush with the sidewalk, so around it. The other 2 require essentially the person walking to dip down into basically the carway, and then back up.
Is that something the active transportation plan can take on?
That's something that that's a piece of it, but if that's there, I'd want to do a deeper dive to see if there's any other potential issues with sidewalks in general in that area.
One issue is how we build them. Because we don't build sidewalks as if we mean them to last more than a couple of years. Curbs too. That's not a planning issue, that's a construction management issue.
But that's related to the code regulations.
Yeah.
So what else do you have?
High issues, so one of the items that was also brought up by 230 was essentially discourage single use from taking up a large amount of frontage. And I'd be interested to hear if council wants to pursue some kind of level of code to create either a frontage maximum or something along those lines for any particular use on any, particularly, or in 5A, one of the items. Then the question that also was partially raised a bit here and there in October and November when we had the walk, is affordability. And that's going to be very vague because it'd be very good to figure out how the commission wants to approach it and also how council wants to approach it. Because we're not just talking about housing affordability, we're also talking about retail and commercial space affordability as well. And this is just hearing from the discussions of how accessible is Narberth to someone that wants to start a business or someone that wants to move into the neighborhood. One thing that was found when Michael and I were going over some of the data from recent sales is that Narberth per square foot is, I believe, the most expensive municipality in Montgomery County. And that's just per square foot of residential space. So.
Is anyone saying yay?
And if the residential is expensive, I would believe that the commercial is probably not far behind.
Oh, no.
So,
We should judge without data.
yeah, that's why that's what I'm saying.
You know, and then the other issue is just the boroughs of small municipalities, so.
So, street trees, facilities, sidewalks, affordability, coordination, what were I missed one or two.
The Montgomery Ave is.
Which we have on the list.
Which, yeah, is one of the bigger ones. What was the other one that I
The
had?
frontage.
Oh, yeah, the greater frontage regulation to prevent, use massing, if that's a very good word. But yeah, that was some of the bigger ones that we have.
Alright. Okay, so what I'd like to do is sort of go around the room like we usually do and ask folks if you have any topics that you also feel are worth our consideration and any questions or thoughts about the topics that have come up so far. And again, our goal is not to solve problems, to debate them really, it's more to figure out which are the ones that are most important to kind of think about going forward. Unfortunately, I have to start to my left.
You're sitting in the wrong seat. Then, quick question for you, two questions for you. On the affordability comment, how does Montgomery County deal with it generally? I mean, tax credits, how to, just curious.
So, in the end, we are we encourage municipalities to take on, so I'm trying to remember, it's either a particular court case that involved, but it essentially encourages the municipalities to be the ones to take on the affordability question and not so much the county.
Okay.
We do have different documents that can assist municipalities on how to pursue affordable housing. I can also get back to you to see if we do have anything deeper that I don't know of off the top of my head. But yeah, that's one of the big things is that it does often fall upon municipalities.
Okay. Yeah, it'd be great to see that tools or information that you have at the county level. It'd be helpful. And then as far as priorities, just something that comes top of mind, and Tim, maybe part of your transportation study, but just, I feel like the stop signs are very inconsistent in Narberth. I feel like we should use some more of them, or crosswalks, just a little bit more safety cautionary, and I just feel like it's very inconsistent across the board. Would be one of my comments, but.
Is that an issue for the active transportation? So
We can crosswalks will definitely come up. So the other thing would be is because stop signs I will, as a former transportation planner, I always have to throw in there that stop signs the big thing that we want to do is probably pair it well with some traffic calming, because there's always, I forget which an engineer said, signs are good, but like something physical will make people react even better. So, but yeah, we can definitely look at the crosswalks and use them.
I mean, in terms of traffic calming, I know there was some online discussion, for example, that if someday the bridge reopens, that there'll be more traffic where there is none now. So we might want to get ahead of that by putting traffic calming in before the bridge reopens to keep the speeds reasonable.
still take traffic calming as an issue, but we would hope that the active transportation plan, which considers bikes and cars and peds.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not, it is, I mean, traffic calming is its own thing too, so.
By the way, I promised I would give everyone a copy of this kind of chart of zoning fixes that we had been working from, that Chloe had been keeping for us, and that we were working from until about this summer, so I'm just gonna pass it on. Okay.
But that would be it for me, more questions than anything, but I agree that priority should be Montgomery Ave, and then I agree with your comments that I think we should probably look at a little bit of the historic versus non-historic and conform the codes. Or clean them up.
Heidi, do you have reactions to these priorities or other issues that you would like to have us consider?
I think the affordable housing one's great. That's my first reaction. And if there are any other municipalities we could, get ideas from. I mean, certainly cities have ways of incorporating working class or lower cost housing into their communities, requiring a certain amount. But another issue that I was wondering about is sidewalk tables and extensions of restaurants into parking areas. Is that an issue that council is addressing? For example, the Greeks. I'm also thinking about if 230 Haverford the planning for that might include the use of the parking lot as a front door to some of those structures. What kind of rules might fall, might help guide that development?
In terms of the first issue, are you suggesting that we just need to kind of look at the rules that govern that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, certainly the pandemic allowed a lot of sidewalk tables and chairs, and I'm not saying I don't like them, I think they're great, but I wonder if there should be some guidelines for it. I was wondering if we have any guidelines.
I do recall there was a lot of council discussion on that. That was back in 2021.
Yeah, a long time ago.
And I do remember there was a lot of discussion about what the guidelines should be and how much,
How much interference
Right.
should be?
but I don't remember where it would be exactly.
I don't think there are design guidelines, and I think the discussions, as I recall, where the police chief insisted that they have a certain mass to sort of protect against cars, skidding by, and they needed to have these sort of Jersey barrier border. So they were operating a lot on sort of the safety aspect, screening the diners from traffic. The outdoor dining ordinance was renewed last year.
Okay.
The one that had been put in place for the pandemic. So there is an encouragement for food services to claim some outdoor space. I think they get an allowance maybe of like 2 or 3 spaces, something like that.
Should there be any design guidelines or construction quality guidelines? Because, it's not inexpensive to build out on the sidewalk in a good way.
Do you think there are other municipalities that have those, or
Philadelphia has
design guidelines?
Yeah, but I'm not sure it's been seen as a huge success.
I wonder if that's the kind of thing that can be advisory. Like people are, it seems like a lot of places are eager to take up advisory. The Great American, they sort of redid their outdoor with the help of. I think the Business Association gave them some money, and an artist, a local craft participated in really designing it and manufacturing some of those pieces. There's real collaboration.
I don't want to dive into them too much. We'll be here, but let me just be clear. What you're suggesting is we should look at, I'm assuming you're suggesting we should try to continue, encourage, manage these, but maybe have a clear set of rules.
Yeah, because you don't want to build something that's going to look bad after a year and then have to live with it.
Okay.
Some of them look bad after a week,
Yeah.
Or immediately.
or almost immediately.
Not
I mean-
almost.
But they perform a great function, and everybody loves them. So let's figure out how to do it right.
Popular topic. Did you have anything else?
That's it.
Okay.
If I may, I mean, I think it depends on if it's a permanent or temporary, because I think to your point, I think if it's more of a permanent structure that's gonna be there and these businesses can invest and count on that, then
Well, and that's what I'm asking
Yeah.
too, is are we gonna permanently allow businesses to take up parking spaces too? And
I think, yeah.
it's kind of like are they renting that from the?
The parking doesn't earn, the parking doesn't earn any money.
It's a new job description.
Big bag quarters.
I mean, so if they're taking out 2 parking spaces, alright, we're not gonna do this.
Let's not. So I think, it sounds like there's a lot of simmering ideas about this. Maybe what's on your mind?
Yeah, well, that was the first item on my list, that we established design standards for the outdoor dining. I think everybody agrees that it's here to stay and it's probably a good thing. And now we should codify how the design goes about so they don't look like they've just been slapped together with a bunch of Jersey barriers.
Yeah, and that are
and
safe.
orange
as
cones.
you're-
Well, that too,
Yeah,
that goes,
yeah.
but then we also care, as much as we cared about the form-based zoning when we wrote it, we should care about this stuff.
Okay.
My other item, and I'm not sure how we approach this, but I keep on thinking we want to get ahead of the idea that someday the station is going to be replaced. And that we be in a position to jump into that discussion with Amtrak and SEPTA when that comes about. And it may not be for 20 years, I don't know. But we're going to be working, after the fact, if we don't jump on it and have some feeling about how we want to affect the design. We lost the opportunity for this last debacle that we've all had to live with. And I sure hope we don't lose it this
Meaning
time.
what they built there
Yeah,
20-some years ago.
more than that. But,
And now it's falling apart, literally falling apart.
yeah, I know that generation of stations have been replaced in other locations already.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, that's a good, that's an interesting thought. Do you have any other issues?
I have lots of issues. No.
Let me rephrase the question. Jim?
That was gonna be my comment too, the SEPTA, the whole SEPTA thing, including the station circle, town square, how it interfaces with the station. We should know, we should drive the bus when it comes, no pun intended, when it
Or the
comes.
train.
We should drive the train when it comes to the development of a real pedestrian, human scale train station, which is what this town is all about historically. It's all about that train. So right now it's an embarrassment. So we want to be in charge, not let some third-rate failed engineer at SEPTA to tell us what we're going to get. So that's what we got last time.
No, that's,
Not that I'm bitter.
it was probably a consultant.
He was, we know who he was.
Totally a
He
consultant.
knows who he was. So I put pins in his doll.
Are there other issues that you think are critical and any other issues that we've
We've
discussed?
mentioned some of them, a lot of them are in here.
Okay.
I mean, it's a lot in this list, some of which, we'll have varying degrees of enthusiasm for. But I need to think about the list longer to be able to rank them in my own mind.
Okay. Jennifer?
I'm not sure if I have anything else to add to the list, but I do find it a priority to reorganize and restructure the code, which I think does get into the review of non-conforming uses. As a newer resident of Narberth, when I started digging into the code, I tagged it as one of the more complicated ones to read and interpret as far as ease of navigating. So I do think that is a primary topic that we should be assessing.
But we do get master's degrees and doctoral degrees in reading our codes. So Did anything else stick out of you or from what people said or other?
I think, that conversation of like the outdoor, if we're gonna continue to increase the desire for the downtown corridor, is there some sort of like review at like a holistic perspective that incorporates, outdoor dining, Station Circle, the train station? Like, is there a way to write it from the perspective of like the walkability and interaction of the downtown?
Okay. What are your reactions to the ideas that have been proposed, and do you have others that you'd like to suggest?
I think it's a lot of list. I mean, I concur with most of it. I think it's a lot to do in 1 year. And then the thing that's not on there is
2 years.
Okay, 2 years. It's much better.
Maybe even 3.
It's for every time there's a new council, that's kind of how we want to pair it, is so then whenever new people are elected, they are able to prioritize based on what the previous people did and then continue on, so.
I'm just used to January setting the annual goals, so 2 years is better.
We'll make this by.
But we may, I don't know, I don't have a strong opinion, but I do think there's something to the notion of like how can we promote business development in the core. Well, really, the whole borough, but I think at the last planning commission meeting, someone described, how we used to have sort of anchor stores, and I think there's something to the critical mass theory and anchor store theory, for example.
Yeah, I didn't put that on the list I wrote up, but that is one we have returned to quite often here. And I think we have quite often said there needs to be some sort of management, but we just don't know what it is.
The idea of a Main Street manager or some function by any other name has been raised time and time again, and never managed to get traction. But if left to our own devices, we're more likely to get nail salons and tobacconists, I'm afraid.
Well, presumably we're getting businesses that will be viable, but I think we need, so I think there may be two parts to this. One is recruiting business owners to launch them, and or having a strategy. What would it take to launch a business in this location if we're looking for particular services or goods? And then the other part is like, well, maybe the residents of the borough need to consume from those businesses more, and maybe that's part of the problem.
Good thing we opened a meat store. So we've talked about this quite a bit, so we can note that is rising. And I mean, Tim helped us organize a walk with folks from the county.
I have some notes for that I can distribute to you guys, so.
Okay, yes, can you see we're just.
Yes, I know.
As a small business point, Tim, are there tools or resources at the county level to help promote small businesses and startups and?
Our economic, basically the folks at the Commerce Department are a total of 3. So they're working based off of what their discussions with Narberth and their other discussions. They're trying to piece together basically a how-to guide of things that you can do to get businesses off the ground, or encourage business within your community based off of communications with communications with both staff, the public, and the businesses themselves. Another item I did just think of for this is intergovernmental cooperation or renting or borrowing of services. For example, an idea would be find an existing either bid organization or something similar, where if they have any staff member that could be lent to Narberth, like for part-time So that way you don't have to hire some, because very few people are ever going to come in, be like a business manager for part-time. It has to be a full-time job. And
That's a possible solution.
Yes.
I know in places there are people called circuit riders whose job it is to visit. So I don't want to so much dwell on the answers. I think that, and I think that I will editorialize for a second. I think on things like housing and these economic development questions, they are, especially housing, regional or national issues that the Pennsylvania system of government, its fragmented system of government, its relatively weak regional government and relatively weak counties and relatively weak state laws don't give us many tools to play with in this regard. So, and a little municipality is really up against it when it's trying to figure out. But I'm convinced there's more, and so those are good that we can do, and those are good topics to keep on the list. Were you going to debate me about that? So you raised your eyebrows when I said our lead system.
I'm not actually today. I was going to actually add another item based on Montgomery County would be kind of explore regional planning with Lower Merion. It may be difficult a bit because two vastly different sizes of both government and populace and geography, but it could be something to kind of communicate with each other. Because that's kind of what we're working with ATP, is that we're doing that a unified plan, maybe explore just kind of a regionalization or regional planning coordination, similar to what they have out in the Pottstown area where all the municipalities around Pottstown are essentially cooperating in their planning goals to push together to create a better planned region. So
we'll tackle that first.
It would actually be great to tap Lower Merion because they've been really working at their whole downtown plan. They have a whole committee that's been putting things together. Do you work at Lower Merion also?
I don't, but my colleague Marley does, and we're working together a lot for the active transportation plan. So I get to meet with folks at Lower Merion about at least once a month to do updates on the plan, and also see and also you kind of see on the fringe from at least my perspective what they're working on in general. So.
And I mean, I think in light of the 230 Haverford project and the other two buildings that Tim Rubin recently is developing, there's a lot of our downtown that's in flux. So it seems like it would be a really good time to figure out what we want downtown and help influence and not let the tail wag the dog on that one, because that could happen if we sit back.
Tim, if I could turn your suggestion into something a little more concrete, might be to identify joint projects with Lower Merion that address our priorities and their priorities, such as Montgomery, such as the active transportation plan, such as coordinated bike planning, if that's not part of here. There might be other things too where.
Housing.
Right. But not, I think it's hard to talk about, like, well, let's just create a regional.
Yeah.
Because I think if you talk about it in terms of an end you'd like to achieve, it's sort of easier to see how that works. And in reality, it starts with just, probably starts with just having projects to do together, and then you find out how those things can work. I do want to ask folks in the audience if you have any comments, but I want to ask the commission a question first. Many of the things that I mentioned on the list were more related to our zoning code and how it functions in terms of land development. To some degree, some of the topics were also how our zoning code functions in terms of longer-term goals, such as housing, diversity, and so forth. I heard a few people refer to them, but I'm wondering what your reactions were to those ideas. If you felt any of those were really critical or urgent, more than others might be. You're talking about things like just cleaning up the code, looking at the housing sections of the code with different objectives in mind, looking at our processes of conditional use and special exception. Did any of those pique your interest as potential priorities?
Cleaning up the code would be really good. It is really, I agree with Jennifer that it's really difficult to find anything in it. Totally depend on you, Todd.
I depend on Michael.
You know, it's ironic, when we sat down in this room in about 2008 to read the then existing zoning code, and we wrang our hands collectively at the old wooden table that used to be sitting here, and very slowly came to the conclusion that it was unsalvageable. Took a year and a half to come to that conclusion. I had hair then, and one of the principles that Dave here articulated most eloquently at the time was that it should be a user-friendly document. And we all had that idea firmly in mind as we worked on it. And one of the outcomes was that it has a lot of graphics in it, where the old code was typed on an Underwood manual typewriter and had no graphics. It was almost impossible for anyone to understand. And to some degree, we achieved a huge success because it's so much better than the old one. But I think we all agree that it fell short of perfection. So it's all the good stuff is in there, it's just jumbled a little bit.
Well, I think as things got added on, it started with clarity, but as things got added on, and then we also realized there were things that weren't clear, like certain ideas, certain words being used in 2 or 3 ways. But mostly just things have been added in haphazardly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I really like that spiral bound copy I had, now I can't use it anymore.
Essentially, I was looking at that today, should I convert it now?
One of the big things about form-based codes is that the big thing about form-based code is that they're supposed to be very easy to access, very easy to read, that you can piece it all together very quickly with what you want to do, and how you want to do it, so.
Yes, but let's remember that most form-based codes are built for places that are being built.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Not for places that are being built. So that's our real challenge. That's why we've had to have so many additions to adapt it to the real conditions as we've done. Okay, so back to the question. Does anyone, so Heidi, thank you for that. Does anyone else have any reactions to the kind of more zoning-oriented topics that I raised?
Well, I think the size of additions, that's pretty important. Because there are some really big additions being proposed.
I've noticed.
It's really big. I mean, they can't tear the house down, but they can double the size more. I mean, we really should talk about how big an addition is allowed to be. Or where it should be and what you see from the street.
Any other reactions, comments about the zoning related topics? Okay, so since we have folks here from the public, we'll ask if anyone from the public would like to make a comment, ask a question, express an opinion about some of the topics or priorities that we've raised so far. I know some of you are on council, hopefully this will come back to you later, but you're here tonight, and so you're welcome to add in any thoughts you might have. So I don't know that I recognize you, but if you have any comments or questions.
Sure. Amongst the different issues that were raised, the ones that spoke close to me were prioritizing the 5B district on Montgomery Avenue. Always felt that accessing businesses on the Arbor side or the other side as a pedestrian or as a cyclist were usually a bit awkward, not always welcoming. But there are a lot of great and useful businesses there, that contribute to the community. It's been nice to, some better regulations, better plans around that area. The housing affordability also spoke to me too. I'm currently renting in Arbor. I'm pretty pessimistic about ever owning in Arbor, but I'm enjoying it while I'm here. So those are the two that the most, seem most pertinent.
Okay. Well, first, welcome. Thanks for coming tonight.
Pleasure.
Does anyone else have any comments? Jean?
In general, I like all of the priorities. I think the one thing we're going to have to work through with council and staff is the timing and overall prioritization and what realistically can be accomplished in the next 2 years. I had one comment about the Montgomery Avenue district. I'm not sure what Lower Marion's timing is on that, but we should kind of check in with them and see like how the timing would work for that. I know they do have that in the plan, but I'm not sure about their exact timing. And then I had a question about, I thought I had seen in a previous list of priorities for Montgomery County Planning Commission to work on the complete streets policy, and I was wondering if that was taken off for any particular reason.
Can you address that?
So we do have an existing policy. I don't know.
Do you think the borough has one?
No, the county has one, but we can do one for the borough if necessary. I was under the interpretation more along the lines of we can definitely make that a part of the ATP.
Active transportation.
Active transportation.
Okay.
So that's why I didn't. It's on our list here. I just figured it's already something that we're engaging with. So.
Well, since you brought that up, I'd like to ask a question in regard to complete streets, or what is the actual product like? Besides the plan, like what does the borough get that it can use?
So there's going to be 2 different items associated with this, and we're working with the steering committee to define how they want to break it down. But our goals have 2 different items. One is identifying major corridors that will get a good amount of the segment planned out. Like, here's how you're going to arrange your bike lanes, your
like an actual conceptual
plan for the main corridors. And then a topology-based street layout. So if your street has these kinds of widths, has these kind of uses around it, we recommend this kind of features to improve the access to your street. Those are the 2 things that we want that are going to be among the deliverables. So.
And it goes without saying that these typologies pertain to a system of constructed streets. We're not building new streets.
Yes.
So those typologies, you mentioned width, but could take into account other things too, like the land use along those streets.
Yep.
'Cause that might impact how they're
utilized. So.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of other issues, but okay. So we'll get conceptual designs for our main streets and kind of concepts that we or typologies we can manage towards in terms of parking and striping or whatever else in the future from this active transportation.
Right.
And that embracing the philosophy of complete streets. And for those folks at home, can you give a concise definition of what a complete street is?
It is basically a street that allows all users to safely access and utilize it to get from point A to point B. That is the most concise definition that you can make. There are others out there that involve tree coverage and basically there's green elements as well if possible, but the main thing is maximizing or encouraging the maximization of safety for all road users no matter what mode of transportation they choose to use.
Well, I mean, to make this real, for example, the next year, my understanding is Lower Marion High School is gonna go to a 1.5 mile radius of no busing, for example. So, which actually is, only a 20-minute walk, give or take. It's not maybe for a 1.5 miles. But, you know, think about Lancaster Avenue, Montgomery Avenue. A lot of these, streets leave a lot to be desired for, certainly for cycling. But I think for pedestrians too. So, you need to do better, faster.
I don't, again, not to dwell too much on one topic, but hopefully in Narberth you'll also consider stormwater management as part of your complete streets, because our streets are one of our main stormwater management tools. Okay, sorry, Jean, we dove into that a little bit. Did you have anything else you wanted to
No, that was it.
remark on? Okay, anyone else? Michael, did you want to talk about the housing issues?
Yeah, I did. So thank you for flagging that. Oh, and I also, before I hit that, there were 2 other things I wanted to flag just based off of the conversation. One of which is, there's been a couple of properties in downtown Narberth that appear to have changed hands in the relatively recent past, one of which is the post office. The federal government didn't own the post office, they still don't own the post office, but that property sold for a significant amount of money relatively recently. So I just wanted to flag that in terms of planning, because if we don't know what's gonna happen with that, I don't know the entity that owns it, but if,
Do we know?
and I don't know what the lease on, I don't know what the federal government's lease on that property is like, but just as a note point that who knows
Where does
what.
that go?
When? In the 50s.
Okay, so it's not just for district.
So for
It's not
the planning commission, that is potentially a major thing to keep an eye on. The other thing that I wanted to just note to keep an eye on is, I don't know what like the future for that, the little outer ring of 5A on Essex holds, and whether, but every time I walk down that, it occurs to me that that is probably like a sleeper for a lot of activity. It's right on the edge. It has pre-existing commercial uses. The bank is moving over to Montgomery Avenue to the new development. So Citizens Bank may not be remaining in that location. There may be another tenant, but again, like that's another thing where we don't know, you know, because that property goes back and then crosses into 4A. And so, you know, maybe there's some sort of planning that needs to be done around that in terms of the gateway from the downtown to the park. And then obviously a chunk of Essex is 1950 single story construction, which to me says that probably there may be some sort of activity on that corridor in the future. I don't know that for a fact, but just in terms of like keeping an eye on what properties in downtown are changing hands and what areas seem like there may be some sort of effort. So I just wanted to flag those 2 things real quick for.
Just mind that real quick. We did a few years back put some rules in that we hope would protect the adjacent, like the rear side of those blocks from spillage from 5A district. So for example, we put in rules that would prevent you from like developing your site on Essex or North Narberth and using the rest of the property like to Dudley or, you know, as parking. I think although if the property goes the whole way through, we don't cover that, but what we didn't want to do is have people assembling through the block and expanding that way. We wanted to, so I think that might be something we need to look at and make sure.
And that property is probably something of a special case as well. And just because it does seem, even though it's odd to talk about that as a super important parcel, I think it probably is, because it really is your gateway from the park to downtown. And right now you're just walking along with cars on either side of you. But especially if you can kind of anchor potentially like that area and continue to anchor Essex, then you are supporting you know, the things that y'all already talked about in terms of economic activity throughout the downtown and creating vibrant third places. So I just wanted to flag that. But I also, because Todd gave me a little bit of a heads up, I did, rather than like word vomiting at all of y'all, I spent today assembling a document vomit so that I don't have to like go through all this and you can just kind of take it with me. So I'm gonna apologize in advance if this is not well written. I just put it out really quickly and you can take it home with you. And it's just kind of the, I think, a problem statement for an issue that is near and dear to my heart, which is housing, and ways to potentially look at growing in a way that is attentive to affordability. It's already been touched on that, you know, income restricted affordable is one major area that needs attention. There's a lot of stuff that I don't hit on in this. I think that there are opportunities for income restricted affordable, which I see as distinct and different from what I would call market affordable. And that's kind of more so what I tried to focus on in here. Unfortunately, it's not in color, so some of the things that I put in here may be hard to see. But basically, I pulled data from the county, I pulled data from NARBRC in terms of how different housing typologies intersect with different levels of affordability on a market basis. And the way that our code, and when I say code, I mean oftentimes it's something as simple as like the lot size standards and the amount of lot area that you need in order to use a typology of a certain kind. There are some other kind of issues, but those end up being the big ones for the kind of like what I would call entry level ownership type units or smaller scale rental. And one of the big takeaways when I did kind of a down and dirty quick audit of the zoning code is that there's a ton of nonconformities. And when I say nonconformities, the only things that I was able to look at in this coding were use by district, like residential use by district, lot size, lot area, lot frontage, and then in 5A, the number of stories, which is a proxy for the height down zoning from a couple years ago. So what this doesn't kind of cover are like building design nonconformities. Like I said, my house is non-conforming with building design because I have a flat roof. There are, you know, multifamily houses that are non-conforming because they have more than one entrance from the street. Like those things are not covered in here. So when I'm looking at these, and I've written preliminary in big letters across all these things because I haven't had the time to do, you know, all of the QC that I would want to do. But I feel confident in saying that actually the nonconformity figures that I posted here are actually conservative because they don't take into account these other things that I know are out there. But from those, I mean, you can kind of see that that you have a large number of nonconformities concentrated in some of the housing typologies that are the most affordable housing typologies. And the main reason for that is that you need 3,000 square feet of land in order to have a single unit. And historically, that wasn't the way that NARBRC grew. And so all across the borough, the spaces that you're familiar with that, you know, started out as large mansions in the 1910s, the 1800s, and over time grew into small multiplexes, which, by the way, I was able to kind of track some of those forward. So about, from what I can tell, about 70% of the multifamily houses we have here were initially single-family houses that grew into multiplexes. Only about 30% were kind of purpose-built. And we can tell from the owner addresses that are listed that a significant number of the folks who own the multifamily houses also live in one of those units and rent out the other ones. Something about 45% of those. So it's not like you have a bunch of people swooping in, buying these and renting them out, which I don't think that would necessarily be a problem even if it were the case, but it is truly a way for folks to live in the borough, age in place, and things of that nature. So I've included like a number of kind of case studies here that you can look at. Interestingly, also just as a note of interest, I find it one of my favorite apartment buildings in the borough, which is at the end of my block, which is the Parkview Apartments. I think they're awesome. Every time I walk by them, I think they're awesome. They're so awesome that there's an illustration of them in the code. The irony is they're not allowed in the zoning district. They're non-conforming. They're not even allowed by conditional use. They are fully prohibited. We have an example in our zoning code of something that is not allowed to be built. And I find that very ironic. The non-conformities, by the way, differ drastically depending on what housing typology you're talking about. Like I said, row homes, multifamily houses, twin homes, the nonconformities that exist there, and for detached homes, the nonconformities that exist there are largely based off of lot size, unit count, which is a proxy for lot size, and frontage. The nonconformities in apartment buildings are less related to those and more related to the fact that apartments are prohibited in large parts of the borough where they already exist. In downtown, the nonconformities related to apartments are related to the height downzoning. The Brenton Hall apartments are 3 stories. We're only allowed to have 2, and so forth. And so, in keeping with one of the comments earlier about the vagueness of a lot of conditional uses, apartments where they are allowed are only allowed by conditional use. Also of note, as far as I can tell, apartments are the only use that are not permitted by right anywhere. Smoke shops and pawn shops are are allowed by right in 5B, assuming you can meet the dispersion. We don't have dispersion for apartments, but as far as I can tell, apartments are the only thing that aren't allowed by right anywhere in the borough. But there are also no actual conditions for what is an allowable conditional use. So there are kind of gaps in that portion of the code. So all that to say, I think that Narberth much of it was largely built out. I think from what I could tell, the majority of units that exist today were built before there was a zoning code at all. Yeah. And certainly the vast majority of them were built before the zoning code changed so drastically. I mean, if you look on the second page, I've listed out kind of the residential, like the first zoning code, there were 2 lot sizes. You were in, downtown, or you were in the old Italian section on Woodbine, and the minimum lot sizes were 1,000 square feet, basically doing anything. Or you were in the residential districts and your minimum lot size was 2,500 square feet. That zoning code was adopted before zoning was actually ruled as constitutional in the country, right? Euclid v. Ambler was 26, this was 24. There's a reason why zoning codes that were adopted at this time were extraordinarily liberal relative to today's standards, and it was because they didn't know whether these things were going to be constitutional. They made them deliberately liberal. And then after they were deemed constitutional and established, they grew in complexity and restrictiveness pretty soon thereafter, and you can see that on here. I have an excerpt in here, the 1986 rules that kind of are the DNA. Well, all of these are kind of the DNA of the lot size standards that we have today. So I want to unpack that a moment, because when we talk about these things, some of the decisions that were made 100 years ago are still with us. The 1924 code, if you look back to the Our Town and the way that they're talking about those codes at the time, the primary goal for some of those were to prevent commercial businesses from expanding into other areas, which I think is arguably contrary to the way that certain parts of Narberth developed. But B, the other big thing was to prevent row homes. Because at that time you had a large influx of immigrant communities into the existing row homes that had been built. Of note, speaking of affordability, at the same time that folks were moving into those row homes, the median home values in Narberth converged with the countywide median. They stayed that way till about the 1980s. And they diverged from the countywide median, and they've started to converge with the Lower Merion median, which we're still a little bit below, but we're much closer to now than we were before. Anyway, point of just historical note on that. So that was the initial kind of impetus for the code. By the 1940s, so when it's established, you see kind of a fracturing of different lot standards. And then in 1986, the standards were all raised. And the explicit goal of doing that was to create nonconformities to prevent people from adding additional units in their homes. The Philadelphia Inquirer's covered that. I think I've excerpted that in here. But when we look at those numbers, like 10,500 square feet, that number is still on our zoning today in the 3A district. 6,000 square feet, that number is still with us today. 3,500 is kind of converted a little bit to 3,000, 1,500 is converted a little bit to 1,400, but the DNA of those decisions is still there. And I think that those decisions probably never reflected this count at the time that they were made. And I don't know that those decisions necessarily serve us well now either. So, I did not meet my goal of not word vomiting at you, but I promise there's a lot more there. It's a subject that's near and dear to my heart, so.
Well, thank you for this work, Michael.
Yeah.
It's interesting. You know, this town developed at a time when the whole idea of zoning was fresh. Untested, untried, and totally foreign. We were the Wild West here in the East.
All right. Well, Jim, do you have any comments or questions?
I like the priorities everyone has laid out. I am excited about complete streets. The Montgomery Ave Business District, I think, is really ripe for pursuit. I think, there are ongoing community groups that are starting to focus on it independently, just neighbors who don't like the way it is now and really think it could be better. So I think if we launched some kind of study or some kind of process over developing a cross-municipal business district overlay of some kind of Lower Merion, I think there would be there's a lot of pent-up interest in that would come out right away. I don't know if you remember that Christina Chang, who's not an Narberth resident, but she lives on the other side. She's led a group that has examined this in a casual manner for years. And they've even had several events to sort of focus attention on the area as an underplanned business area that could really benefit. So if there's appetite for that and if there's bandwidth for that, I would really like to see that happen. Hopefully while I'm on council, that would be great. That's my neighborhood too, so I'm as what's the word? I'm as unimpressed by it as everyone else is. Yeah. So that would be my main interest.
Okay. All right, well, we're an hour and 45 minutes in. What I would like to suggest is we should, maybe between Jennifer and I, just sort of, we're doing minutes, we can consolidate our notes on this and issue some kind of summary to council. The things I'm hearing passionate about are a variety of topics that could be put under the umbrella of residential zoning issues, from additions to nonconformities to how our code impacts the diversity and cost of housing. There's perhaps a acknowledgement that some sort of recodification, reorganization, clarification in code would be important. Two downtown topics, the kind of shoulder areas and the edges of downtown, and looking at the tools we have to sort of generate the commercial diversity environments that we're looking for. Actually, third downtown, there's, to me, unexpected, but now not surprising, passionate about streeteries and how they're built and designed and function. I mean, those are things let's see, and then traffic, the overall management of the public realm in terms of traffic, pedestrian, and biking, whether you call it traffic calming, or complete streets, or active transportation, or just putting up more stop signs, whatever you were thinking. Those are kind of the big, I think those are kind of the topics that emerge when I kind of look at this all. But perhaps we can put together notes, send it around to everyone, and at a future meeting when we have time, see if that reflects the kind of priorities we'd like to suggest to council. Does that sound like a good plan? Okay, any closing thoughts or comments? I think, by the way, that member should note the comp plan to-do list that Tim mentioned as well. Which are not all things which are within our purview, but are worth reviewing. Any other comments or questions tonight? Any public comment on any other matters that are not on the agenda of the Planning Commission tonight? Okay, with that then, could we entertain a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Sure, I know it was hard because it's not a second. All in favor of adjournment? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you.
The Commerce Committee or Commerce Department.